One of the best principals I work with teaches a parenting class. So the parents come and it's free, it's not mandatory, but she makes it fun in the sense that she gives out merch, like swag, like just stuff. If you're there every so often, she'll throw things out. And she also has a catered like dinner. So the parents come and they get really good food. It's not like five-star food, but it's like nice, yummy food. It's a warm, welcoming environment. The more the parents come, they feel like they really have a connection to this principal.
Hi there, you're listening to our guest again this week, Dr. Robyn Koslowitz, the Educational Director of the Targeted Parenting Institute in New Jersey. And I'm Stan Baker, one of the hosts of Circle Forum, along with Shelley Steele and Steve Young. Dr. K discusses addressing the shift in parental attitudes towards school attendance post-COVID, where school is seen as an option rather than something mandatory. Principals can create strong, positive relationships with parents through things like hosting inclusive parenting classes. It prevents and even avoids a judging approach, which often blames parents.
This week's podcast is brought to you by the word parenting. Parenting impacts student well-being and attendance at school. Consistent and positive morning routines reduce stress and anxiety for both parents and children, making the transition to school smoother. Establishing regular sleep routines ensures that students are well rested and ready for school. Research shows that parental involvement, such as attending school meetings or events, correlates with better attendance because it fosters a sense of importance around education. When parents demonstrate commitment to their own schedules, whether it's work or personal obligations, they teach children the value of regular attendance and responsibility.
At the end of this episode, be sure to visit our website, www.restorative.ca, where you can find lots of relational resources. And if you enjoy this episode, make sure you subscribe on Spotify or YouTube. Again, this week we had some technical issues where we weren't able to sync the video with the audio. So just sit back and listen and enjoy. Shelley's away, so let's head over to this discussion with Steve and me, Stan. Another question, because sometimes the trauma or what's gone on in the morning or fears of what's coming up for the day make the child say, well, look, I don't want to go to school. And certainly post-COVID, we've seen some real changes in parental attitudes towards attending school. Hey, it was optional then. Why has it got to be so mandatory now? How can we use your approach to help principals address a real change and a shift in parental attitudes towards being in school?
So it's a hard one because I think until COVID, there was just this assumption you go to school. The sky is blue and there's this thing called gravity and like you go to school. And suddenly that assumption went away. Oh, okay, school's optional. This is great, right? And there are parents who are coping with so much in their lives that fighting with a kid about going to school, which maybe pre-COVID, had COVID never happened, it wouldn't have even occurred to the child that school is optional. Like he's going to fight about something else, but he's not going to fight about school. He wants more screen time and a more violent video game than mom is comfortable getting him, and that would be where the battle is set. But now school is where the battle is set. So first of all, obviously, the more we make school a welcoming, warm place where you want to be there, the less resistance you're going to have, right? So we want to have that. There's also an idea of getting children tuned into how good it feels to be around other humans and interact in the real world as opposed to in the digital world, and how good it feels to move together with other people, to learn together, to have a discussion, to have a conversation. I love the book. Mo Willems has this book about he has this pigeon character that's very funny. And one of the books is called Pigeon Has to Go to School. And there's this whole thing where pigeons, I don't want to go to school. I don't know how to do math. There should be a place where they teach you these things. And then it occurs to me that is school. I could remember myself, an experience I had where it was like, at one point, I had such an incredible mentor in graduate school. Her name was Dr. Sandy McLowry, and she was just incredible. She was my dissertation chair. And I was a real perfectionist. And I think having been a traumatized child with that like skin deep resilience where I looked perfect on the surface and I was getting straight A's and I was pushing myself, I had this imposter syndrome that I always had to look perfect. I remember going into her lab And she was telling me these analyses she wanted me to run. And she must have picked up this mild look of panic on my face. And she's like, Robyn, what's wrong? And I said, oh, I don't know how to run that analysis, but don't worry, I'll go onto YouTube. She's like, Robyn, of course you don't know how to run that analysis. I haven't taught you how yet. That's why you're my graduate student and I'm the professor, because I'm going to teach you how to run the analysis. Then you will know, then you will run the analysis. It didn't occur to me that you can ask an adult for help. So I was an adult, but you can ask the wiser person for help. And they're not going to say, okay, we're voting you off the island of humanity. They'll just tell you how to do it. It was like, oh. And I feel like we want to do that with kids like more and more. School is not a proving ground. School is not a place where, you jockey for position and where, or 8 hours of torture you have to like undergo. School should be a place where sometimes average stuff happens, but sometimes great stuff happens. Occasionally bad stuff happens, but on the whole, it's a good place. The net associations are positive. And if they aren't, we have to figure out why. What's the skill you're lacking? What's the emotional support you need? Like, where can we fill in a hole? Because then school is not so scary. And school isn't for everybody. There's the occasional kid who really does need to be homeschooled and just not cut out for school. And I think with those kids, it's about, we'll try, we'll scaffold you, we'll make sure you have the skills so you could go if you want to. But there are alternatives, as long as you know there's a parent who's actually going to be educating them. I'm not saying I'm homeschooling my child, but that means they can do 8 hours of Minecraft a day.
What would you recommend to school principals to help them move their schools more towards understanding parents and parents who've experienced trauma?
One of the best principals I work with teaches a parenting class. So the parents come and it's free, it's not mandatory, but she makes it fun in the sense that she gives out merch, like swag, like just stuff. If you're there, every so often she'll throw things out. And she also has a catered like dinner. So the parents come and they get really good food. It's not like 5-star food, but it's like nice, yummy food. It's a warm, welcoming environment. The more the parents come, they feel like they really have a connection to this principal. And she follows a curriculum. She's teaching child development. She's teaching, it's not like she's doing like specialty, like how to parent anxious kids, or it's a standard curriculum with a lot of discussion and a lot of conversation and like, how does this apply to your kid? The parents want to come because it's fun, it's welcoming, it's warm. And the more the parents feel like I have a connection to this person and together we are partners in making this kid happen, right? We're going to make this kid's life happen. Because you have a lot of parents who come from this place, especially if you have trauma or just a persistent sense of self-doubt. I'm just not a good enough parent. I'm doing it wrong. It's my fault, right? It's the Taylor Swift song, it's me, I'm the problem, it's me. Parents feel that. I was talking actually this morning to a woman who came to my house to deliver something, and she has a micro preemie, and she was telling me how, I don't know, she really wants to nurse this child, and she's been pumping for 7 months. The baby was born, I think, at 3 pounds. She's been nursing, she's been pumping, and I don't know, I feel like I missed the boat. She's 7 months now. She really doesn't want to nurse. And I said, can we notice that language for a minute? Look at how you're judging yourself. I missed the boat. You stepped up to a challenge of giving birth to a preemie. Like, there were no indicators. She wasn't expecting this. She was a very young mother. And then she had this baby. She stepped up to the challenge. Pumping for 7 months straight, that is quite the dedication while working, while having a business. And I missed the boat. You didn't miss the boat. The boat may have sailed without you. It is true. At 7 months, the baby may have decided, especially because she was a preemie, she may have has her preference for how she's going to feed, and you may not be able to change her mind. You didn't miss the boat. The boat happened to be sailing, right? And it was sailing at a time that was inconvenient for you. Her neurology may not support it. But why are you judging yourself that way? Can we notice that? And so it's that kind of thing. You're bringing parents in for a parenting class, not because they have problems. I was consulting in a school, and there was one grade that the parents were really difficult. The principal was at her wit's end, and she wanted to have a parenting class that I was going to teach to the most challenging parents. I'm like, no, we are opening it up to all the parents of the 5th grade. Because if it's these 7 parents, you're being called into the principal's office. You just happen to be adults. But if it's the whole grade, and maybe we incentivize these 7 parents for coming So we make sure they come. It's a whole different thing.
That really resonates with an student attendance research project that we attempted last fall, where we identified 9 parents whose kids were at risk of chronic absenteeism and said, would you like to be part of this research project? And they said, hell no. And why are you judging? I'm a single mom. Why are you asking me and judging me about my parenting? And we had to change it. So I really like the approach of, no, it's for everyone. How can we help school principals talk and work with parents in a way that they don't feel like they're being judged? Because the primary teachers are really good at teaching kids and relating to kids, but they just don't have the skill set to talk with adults about stuff that's really important. And one teacher actually said, I don't want to talk to them about attendance because the parent's going to think that I'm judging them. And so I just rather avoid it.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? We avoid the hard conversations. And when we avoid them the first time, they're just a little problem, and then they get bigger, and then it's like a mountain that I cannot climb because I haven't said anything to this mother, and it's 3 years later now. So it's really important to have the conversation right away. But it's true. I had a cartoon once on my Instagram that said, the school called, it's like, we need to talk about Brian. His reading is below grade level. That's what the school says. What the mom hears, you are a bad mom. You are a bad mom, right? So we have to make sure that the unstated is not, you are a bad mom. And this is where, if we can, start out by noticing something positive about a child and telling that parent that right away, so that the parent already has a positive association with communications from us. And there's always something positive to say about every child. Then it's easier to have the conversations about the troubleshooting. But if you start the conversation from a place of, you're a great mom and Brian's a great kid, and I notice he's absent, and we can't have him not in our class because we miss him. He's a member of our community and he adds so much to our classroom. Can you and I work together and figure this out? Teach me about Brian. I'm the expert on second grade. You're the expert on Brian. Teach me Brian. Then they're coming from this place of, yes, I'm the expert.
And that overlaps so much with what we try to teach, or what we talk to schools and teachers about, building those relationships, those positive relationships with families, preferably before you have an attendance problem or any kind of a problem, so that you can reach out to parents in a way that you've already got a positive relationship. You know a bit about their family background. So when you make a statement, look, I know you're great parents, you're saying that because you actually know that. And so we really try to push schools and teachers to proactively build relationships, not just with their students, but the families and the parents of those students, so that when the tough times do come, you can have those conversations and you feel less threatened and you're ready to jump in, so that when the hard times come, we're better able to handle it. It's the same with principals dealing with their staff members. Get to know your staff members, get to know what their background is. You may uncover a few things you didn't know, but all of a sudden when there's a problem with that staff, or that staff member's finding times challenging, you feel more comfortable going in and having a one-to-one conversation with them about, hey, tell me what's going on here, what's happening with you.
But it's also putting your money where your mouth is, because I think we expect teachers, out of the goodness of their heart, to give time that they're not like contracted for, and they should have lives, because a teacher who has a life is a teacher who's not burnt out and a teacher who is committed. So when a school says, I am giving you 2 periods a week for parent outreach, and during that time, this is what I expect to do. I want to see a log because we want to make sure that it's done, and it's not like your hour to leave early, but you're actually doing parent outreach during that time, or we will pay you for after hours parent outreach, then it's so much more, it's first of all, it's so respectful to the teacher, and it's so much more likely to happen. This is part of your job. Therefore, we will allot the time to make that happen. One of my own children's school has a parent-teacher communication log that the teachers call at least once a month about every kid, not only when there's a problem, and update you on the child's progress. And it goes into a book and it goes into a log, and you can actually ask to see the log. And it's really helpful. It's helpful in those situations where like a parent is, what do you mean he can't read? You never told me. And then you have that, we did, right? Like I get why maybe you didn't remember or whatever, but like we have that sort of paper trail so that the teacher feels defended and feels safe, right? Because this is an era where teachers are being sued. And I feel like the self-care of the teacher is important. But then at the same token, you have so much more of an opportunity to really build a relationship with parents. When at the beginning of the year, there's a secretary who calls and says, for teacher-parent communication, what slots do you prefer? Morning, afternoon, evening, and then you like sign up for what slot, and then to make yourself available. Like I'm not available during the daytime hours because my phone is on silent when I'm working. My husband is my kid's emergency contact for the nurse, but I can't do teacher school communication then, but the evening works. So it's just and it feels so respectful to the teachers and to the parents that the teachers are being paid for this and that the parents feel like I'm a partner and I know what's going on. And then you just get to hear, like, when your kid doesn't have any problems, you're just hearing heartwarming anecdotes about their day and what goes on for their life, which is lovely.
I love that parent outreach periods. Great idea.
The idea of relationship building, and it comes through in a lot of your answers and a lot of your suggestions. It's about the relationships that staff have with parents, that staff have with their children in their classroom, that administrators have with their staff and children. It's all about relationship building. And if you've got those strong relationships, if children have a trusted, caring adult that they can go to, then we can manage trauma. We can work with trauma. We can get through the rocky times, and children learn to be more resilient. So I like the idea of constantly building those relationships.
Thank
Robyn,
you.
The last word to you.
So I think with adults, what trauma does is it makes us not available for relationships. Because what happens is, I call it like the myopia of trauma, like we become very nearsighted, right? Trauma just gets us very self-focused and we don't notice the things we need to notice. So if you're a teacher or a principal and there's a mechanism for dealing with your own trauma, dealing with having your teachers deal with their trauma, then you're opening the door more and more to making them available for a relationship, because that is the one thing that you can't get at home. Like you can do an online school now and you can learn math facts and you can do all of those like technical, like I can import the facts about science that the fifth graders need to know into your brain many ways. I can't do a relationship that way. Right? It's not the same. The fact is we are all not in the same room. And as wonderful as this interaction has been, it's not the same as being in the same room. So we have to make ourselves available for relationships, and we have to remove the barriers to relationships for our teachers, because that's what education is, right? The giving over of facts is just a very old-fashioned view of what education is. Education is about making people. Right? It's not so much about making people who can compute math, because computers can compute math better. And that we can only do if we free ourselves up for relationships. So that's my other thing about trauma, that it constrains our ability to have relationships. And if you think of any relationship that you struggle with in your life, there is likely a traumatic component to that relationship. So get help with it. And the other side, I think school administrators have a hard time with this, where I'm this principal and now I'm going to say that because something happened to me 35 years ago, I'm traumatized and I'm a well-developed adult and I'm doing so well in my life. But the idea of processing your trauma is, if I go to a potluck and one of my neighbors bakes really good cookies, I could sit there and try to tease out what ingredients she put in the cookies. And I might be right, I might be wrong. I could waste a lot of ingredients and time and frustration trying to figure it out. Or I can call the person with the recipe and say, like, how'd you make those cookies? And that's all therapy is. It's the person who knows how to help you unpack that, not because there's something bad about you, but because this was probably a formative experience that's likely a superpower of yours if we could unlock the full potential of it. That's all it is, right? And if we look at therapy that way, or if we look at whatever kind of help and support that way, then it suddenly becomes so counter-shaming. Like, it's so not about, oh, there's something wrong with you, go to therapy.
Dr. Koslowitz stresses that a principal's understanding of how trauma affects both students and adults can actually support teachers in dealing with their own trauma to create more relational and supportive school environment for their students. Find out more about our work with restorative practices and some very practical tips at www.restorative.ca. You can email me, stan@restorative.ca. While it's not the only thing, building connections and establishing positive relationships between students and the staff in the school can really help mitigate the effects of trauma.